What is up, Fix Blair here for Thomann synthesizers, and recently I've spent a lot of time creating my own library of vocal samples. Not necessarily singing vocals per se, but yeah, these abstract kind of snippets and abstract patterns of sampled human voices, be it male or female, that yeah, just create a certain kind of vibe when used in electronic music. I always think the human voice, we really respond to that in a special way. So vocals can be a great way to create a supernatural feeling if you actually take the human voice and then apply effects to it and do stuff with it that wouldn't be possible in reality. It, in my opinion, always creates an interesting, intense effect because we're so used to processing the human voice in its natural condition. So I think I'm going to split this into two videos, and in this first one I'm going to show you how I find vocals, some various sources where you could gather them or create them yourself, and how I sequence and slice them and rearrange them in my Octatrack or Ableton or however you want to do it. And then maybe in the next second video I'm going to go a bit deeper into the processing and what kind of effects I like to use. And yeah, let's get started. Alright, so here we are inside of my Ableton, and what we're going to do here is we're going to have a look at two of my projects in which I utilize vocal samples in various different ways. This first one is going to be a bit more of a conventional dance floor oriented track where I use it in a sort of classic way, how you would use some of these classic UK dance music type vocals. And then the next one is going to be a bit more of a futuristic, dark, experimental kind of tune where I work with the vocals in a bit more experimental way. Obviously, there's pretty much no limits to what you can do. And if you have a specific genre in mind that you want to express yourself in, obviously it makes sense to study the tropes of the genre, because often in a subgenre of electronic music, there's a particular way of sourcing vocal samples from particular other genres, like for example dubstep usually samples reggae and dub vocals, which is then a part of the dubstep aesthetic, at least if you're talking about classic kind of dubstep in its original form. This goes for mostly all of the genres, so if you have something in mind already, study the genre that you're going for. Anyways, here I'm going to be inspired by the classic UK dance music tropes. So the first sample pack that I have to recommend again is the classic Jungle Jungle 1989 to 99 sample pack. Everybody uses this, super overused, but there's still people coming up with unique and interesting ways of actually flipping these samples, which is always lovely. And obviously this pack already evokes a kind of certain aesthetic. And if you have a typical kind of electro or techno drum beat, and then you start to add some of these samples, you're instantly going to get a UK jungle, drum and bass, UK bass kind of aesthetic.
Hold on. You dream of heaven. Will it bad boy sound? Let it roll.
A London something rust. Come in. What is rude boy?
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard pretty much all of these a bunch of times. Anyways, let's see what I did with some of them, and let's have a little listen at some of the moments here from the range. First, let's have a listen at these two individual vocal samples that I used here. This is one of them. And this right here is the other one. And what I did with this one, the stepper vocal sample, is that I basically put some rhythmical accents on the ones. So it just further accentuates the one of the beat. And then what I also always really like is this sort of James Brown kind of aesthetic where you have a sort of in the very end of the bar. So right before the one in a syncopated way, you have this rhythmical, percussive kind of vocal impact, which you can see here. Yeah, just very subtle. Now let's have a listen at the other one here, the calm vocal. What does this do? I personally interpret it almost as part of the basic drum groove. There's parts in the arrangement where I turn it off, but to me it's sort of part of the rhythmical composition of the drum here. Also, for example, in a moment where I flip some of the drums, I also flip this vocal sample. There it is. Yeah, you get the idea. And then there's a third vocal sample, actually. It's the same piece of audio material, but sampled in a different way. Let's have a listen here, what I did. This right here is the actual source material, the sample also from the Jungle pack. And what I did, basically, not exactly like this, but sort of like this, I took it, duplicated it, then reversed one of them. So I have this endless loop of ups and downs, and then what I did is I added this super quick 16th note volume automation here, turning the volume from full to 0. Yeah, giving this super stimulating, intense rhythmical pattern here, which I use in the arrangement because it creates a lot of tension and yeah, it has a really strong impact. So let's listen to it in the context of the break here. Only enters in a more quiet way, and then it has this volume automation here, slowly building up. Exactly. But besides from that, what are other ways to source vocal samples? Obviously, you could go to YouTube, you could sample podcasts, movies, whatever, because you don't have to sample musical ideas. You could also just sample speech, of course. But one of the things that I really like to do at the moment is to use Splice, which, in case you don't know it, is basically a place where you can subscribe and then you get a certain amount of downloads for samples per month. This is not sponsored by Splice. This is just where I get a lot of my samples. You could also opt for alternatives like freesound.org, for example, where you just have to make an account and then you're gonna get all sorts of free stuff. But it's created by a community of users. It's more centered around field recordings, and this here is more commercial sample packs where you can download only the individual samples that you like. And for example, let's say I wanted to create 90s type underground house music. I would just type in something like underground deep house and likely skip through it here. Okay, and I already see, yeah, that's the kind of aesthetic that I'm going for. And now I'm going to look here for the vocal section and just search for vocals. And now what I'm going to find is most likely going to be vocal samples in the vein of disco, funk, soul, R&B, likely already processed in a way to sound like they're from the 70s. Exactly. One more time. Okay, some are also whack. You have to have some patience. but then you're gonna eventually find these classic type of sounds that you need for your genre. And I don't know, if I type in dub vocal, I'm gonna get some stuff drenched in tape echo and spring reverb, I guess.
Bad boy sound on this
With the Jamaican accent, obviously.
my sound shine.
Exactly. So you get the idea. This is where I get a lot of my samples at the moment as well. So let's have a little look at this alternative project here.
Is this real love? Is it pretend? Oh baby, I can't pretend. Oh baby, let me know.
Alright, so let's have a look at the groups first to get a rough idea. Here we have this drum loop, obviously consisting of many different abstract noise and Foley sounds and some actual drums mixed in. Then this abstract, heavily processed chord here, which is a very unstable pitch. Which basically contributes the main atmosphere, and now obviously here the vocal group, which on its own sounds like this.
Is this real love? Is it pretend? Oh baby, I can't pretend. Oh baby, let me know.
Alright, you get the idea. What did I do here? I have 4 layers. This is the first one. Sort of just like a female, almost breath type sound that has a distinct pitch. And then it's paired with this second vocal that I use in a much more percussive way, with a much more percussive envelope, and which also has some melodic content, because I think the individual slices, they have different pitches. And what I did is I created a sort of interplay. So sometimes these two hit on the same note and support each other, and sometimes there's a little question and answer going on. And the first sound leads into the other, and vice versa. Alright, and then this third one here, which in its affected sound
Is this real love?
sounds like this.
Or is it pretend?
Some actual vocal lyricism here with a melody baked in. But I'm going to show you the original dry sound. I think, yeah, this is also from Splice originally. And this is what it sounded like in the beginning.
Oh, baby, is this real love? Oh, can we pretend? Oh, baby, let me know.
So, at its original pitch, it's a female R&B type vocal performance, and what I did is something I like to do. Lower it by like around 5 semitones, and what you're gonna get is something that doesn't sound like a female voice, but it sort of sounds like a male voice, but something in between, and it sounds very otherworldly and unnatural, and I think it has a great futuristic, gloomy, dark effect. So this is what it sounds like.
Baby, is this real love?
And then I applied some effects, and in the context it sounds like this.
Oh, baby, I can't pretend. Oh, baby, let me know.
Leading us to the last vocal sample here, which I think in its original dry state sounded like this. It's also from Splice. And I actually find this loop to be terribly annoying, but I noticed while skipping through Splice that this very first slice here I actually kind of like. This is kind of an interesting vibe. So what I did is I used this also to accentuate the one. but only occasionally, and then put a large tape echo that has an inconsistent pitch on top of it, and then it sounds like this. Yes, and then again, I think at least these two vocals here that are more percussive, I would actually in the final production stages put it into the drum group so that it gets compressed and processed together with all the other drums, while these other two might be going somewhere else in the mix. And then before I forget, how did I actually place this vocal sample here in the mix? Obviously, in the arrangement, obviously I didn't just put it in there and hope for the best, but actually I made use of Ableton's warping capabilities, where you can change the timing of individual elements without actually changing the pitch. And Ableton has various different algorithms which you can select here. And even though some are specialized for drums and some are specialized for melodies and pads and whatnot, it's always good to just try out all of them because it's not so many. And sometimes you get interesting and surprising results while trying out these various different algorithms. This way I adjusted the timing of the individual syllables to the rhythm of my beat in an intuitive way, which is super quick. And it also obviously can introduce some artifacts. As you can hear, it sounds very unnatural sometimes. You could adjust this by adjusting the algorithm, but in this case I actually liked the futuristic, artificial, impossible kind of sound here, because that's the vibe I was going for here. Alright, I guess that's it from my side for today. As usual, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'm trying to get back to you ASAP. And apart from that, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Peace out.